Evelyn sat across from her father at the kitchen table and spoke the sentence she had carried for years like a locked weight in her chest. She told him calmly that if she heard one more word from his wife about her money, there would be no polite conversations left. Her voice did not rise, yet the air in the room shifted so sharply that even the refrigerator seemed to hum louder. Her stepmother, Karen, froze with her coffee cup halfway lifted, her eyes widening in slow disbelief. Her father stared at Evelyn as if he didn't recognize the daughter he had raised. He swallowed hard, and in that moment, everything in their family quietly changed without a single shout. Evelyn had grown up believing families broke loudly, with slammed doors and voices sharp enough to cut the air. She never understood they could also break softly, one polite smile at a time, until she lived it in her own home. When Evelyn was 15, her mother died from fast and unforgiving cancer that took their world apart by winter. At the funeral, people told her she was strong, but she hated the word because strong meant she wasn't allowed to fall apart. Less than a year later, her father introduced Karen as someone who had brought light back into his life. Evelyn felt too young to protest and too old to pretend she didn't see the cracks forming. Karen wasn't openly cruel, and that was the problem Evelyn learned too late. The woman smiled gently, spoke softly, and touched Evelyn's arm as if they were already close friends rather than uneasy strangers. Neighbors adored her because she brought casseroles and wine to gatherings, telling everyone how proud she was to be part of their family. Evelyn, 17 by then, kept quiet even when Karen slowly rearranged the house into something unfamiliar. By the time Evelyn left for basic training at 19, her father hugged her tightly, insisting he was proud. Karen shed small, delicate tears and told Evelyn not to worry because they would take care of everything. The military taught Evelyn discipline, patience, and the ability to read a room before speaking. Those skills stayed with her long after she completed training. During her second year of service, the first comment about her money appeared during a video call. Karen sat beside Evelyn's father with her hand resting lightly on his knee, a gesture that made her belong in the center of every decision. With a sweet smile, Karen said, "It's wonderful knowing the family has financial security now." Evelyn felt something tighten inside her as she replied, "I manage." She didn't like the way Karen used the word family, as if Evelyn's income automatically belonged to them. The comments continued over the months, always wrapped in polite concern that felt more like pressure each time. Karen suggested long-term planning, hinted that Evelyn was too young to manage everything, and often mentioned how easier life would be if her father handled the accounts. Evelyn watched her father nod quietly as if he had already accepted Karen's decisions before Evelyn even responded. When Evelyn returned home on leave, she noticed changes in the house, especially the missing desk her mother once used. Karen simply waved her hand and said, "We organized the old things. You don't need to worry about that now." That night, Evelyn lay awake feeling like a visitor in the home she once belonged to. The breaking point for Evelyn did not arrive with shouting or accusations. It arrived through a simple bank alert in her email. The message stated there had been an attempted access to her account with incorrect verification, something no one but her should have had. When she called the bank, the representative asked if she had authorized anyone to help manage her finances. Evelyn answered firmly, "No." The representative mentioned the inquiry came from her father's address, and Evelyn felt a cold heaviness settle inside her. 2 weeks later, she went home on leave determined to watch before speaking. During that visit, Evelyn noticed that Karen talked about money more confidently, often mentioning bills, investments, and household responsibilities. One evening, Karen stepped closer and said casually, "Well, your money is really part of this household anyway." Evelyn looked at her father waiting for him to correct Karen, but he stayed silent. That silence revealed more than any argument could. Evelyn stood up from the table with calm strength and repeated the boundary she had set before. She told her father that if his wife mentioned her money again, she would no longer remain polite. Evelyn didn't expect overnight change, and she was right. Karen didn't retreat because she was confronted. Instead, Karen adjusted her approach, using soft stories about stress and responsibility to create guilt without ever making direct requests. Meanwhile, Evelyn noticed her father shrinking in conversations, glancing at Karen before speaking as if waiting for permission. It reminded Evelyn of something the military had taught her. Control often came through conditioning, not force. Karen pushed slowly, confidently, believing that Evelyn's silence meant surrender. Evelyn watched everything carefully, saying nothing as she began to understand Karen's real intentions. The next test came at a family gathering, the kind filled with too much food and distant relatives pretending they were close. Evelyn was eating quietly when Karen laughed and announced to an aunt, "With Evelyn's military income, we're very lucky as a family." Evelyn didn't look at Karen, she looked directly at her father instead. He chuckled softly and said, "She's doing well." That tiny sentence was the crack Evelyn had been waiting to see. Later that night she pulled him aside and reminded him of the boundary he had allowed Karen to cross again. Her father insisted Evelyn was reading too much into things, but she recognized avoidance when she saw it. A few days later another bank alert arrived, this one asking about adding an authorized user, something Evelyn had never requested. She didn't confront anyone, she documented every detail instead. She saved the emails, the dates, the comments and the uncomfortable silences, knowing emotions faded but records didn't. Karen grew bolder, making jokes about Evelyn cutting the family off, thinking Evelyn's quiet meant she had surrendered. But Evelyn was no longer reacting, she was preparing. The situation escalated when Karen placed a stack of papers on the kitchen counter one evening after dinner. She smiled sweetly and told Evelyn's father, "These are just estimates. We can look at options together." Evelyn recognized the bank logo immediately and felt a cold certainty forming inside her. That night she lay awake listening to the house breathe in slow, familiar sounds she no longer trusted. She replayed every comment, every silence, and every decision her father allowed Karen to make without question. By sunrise, Evelyn knew she needed more than warnings, she needed action. Evelyn started her morning run before dawn, letting the cold air clear her thoughts. With each step she accepted the truth she had been avoiding for years, that Karen didn't want help, she wanted control. When she walked back into the kitchen, Karen greeted her with a soft smile and said, "Morning. Sleep well." Evelyn answered, "I've been listening," and saw the flicker of confusion in Karen's eyes. Later that afternoon, Evelyn made her first call to legal assistance, describing everything as a hypothetical situation. When the officer asked, "Did you authorize any of this?" and she said no, she felt validated in a way she hadn't expected. That evening, Karen tried one more gentle attempt to sway her. She placed a hand on Evelyn's arm and said, "Everything we do is for this family." Evelyn removed her arm and replied, "My money isn't." Karen's smile disappeared for the first time since Evelyn had known her. As Evelyn walked away she sensed the shift, the moment Karen realized the old pattern wasn't working anymore. Karen didn't fear confrontation, she feared losing leverage. Evelyn understood that now, and understanding changed everything. The truth came in fragments, beginning with a letter forwarded from her father's house while Evelyn was back on base. The envelope had been opened and resealed poorly, almost disrespectfully. Inside was a notice from a credit card company thanking her father for his inquiry about balance transfers for an account under Evelyn's name. She called the number immediately, and the representative confirmed someone had attempted access but had not succeeded yet. When the woman asked if anyone might believe they were allowed to do this, Evelyn answered firmly, "No." That single word felt heavier than the entire conversation. Evelyn locked down every account that same afternoon, changing passwords, adding verbal codes and freezing her credit. She flagged everything for heightened monitoring and saved every confirmation email in a digital folder labeled Evidence. The representative told her, "You did the right thing by calling early," and that word, early, stayed with her. Evelyn realized that if she hadn't noticed the alerts, something far worse could have happened. The next clue surfaced during her visit home when she searched the study for one of her mother's old notebooks. Instead she found a folder labeled Planning, filled with documents outlining plans involving her assets, plans she never agreed to. Her hands stayed steady but her heart did not. Inside that folder, Evelyn found printed emails, budget drafts, and loan projections with her name typed clearly at the top of each document. Some pages described temporary transfers, while others discussed family use and eventual consolidation. None of it came from her. The most disturbing page was a handwritten note tucked behind a spreadsheet that read, "She won't say no forever. Once she understands responsibility, she'll accept it." Evelyn closed the folder quietly, hearing Karen move around in the kitchen like everything was normal. She walked out of the study knowing the truth had finally stepped out of the shadows. That evening, Karen spoke about rising costs and inflation while Evelyn watched her father nod along without adding a single original thought. Evelyn realized she had spent years defending his silence, calling it kindness or exhaustion, but now she understood it differently. Silence could be participation. Later, her father knocked on her door looking uncomfortable, saying Karen felt Evelyn seemed distant. Evelyn replied calmly, "I found the folder," and watched him stiffen instantly. He accused her of going through their things, but she answered, "I recognized my own name on plans I didn't make." After he left, Evelyn sat on the edge of her childhood bed and let the truth settle. Her father wasn't being manipulated, he was participating because it made his life easier. The next morning, Evelyn called the fraud department again, this time with names, dates, and exact details. The agent told her to keep documenting and added, "Do not confront them directly." Evelyn created a detailed system, scanning every document she found and saving all screenshots and logs in 2 secure places. She learned the laws that applied to her situation and treated the entire process like intelligence work. Karen noticed the shift in Evelyn before her father did. On one phone call she said lightly, "You've been very busy. You barely tell us anything anymore." Evelyn simply replied, "I'm focused," and ended the call. A few weeks later, a loan officer accidentally emailed Evelyn instead of her father with a draft application listing expected future income under her name. That was the final confirmation she needed. This wasn't confusion or overstepping, it was strategy. Evelyn didn't react emotionally, she became methodical. She let Karen believe she was winning by mentioning how tiring it was to manage everything alone. When Karen heard the uncertainty in Evelyn's voice, she leaned in quickly saying, "You don't have to do this by yourself. Families share burdens." Evelyn nodded as if she agreed, knowing Karen would push harder. Over the next weeks, Karen made careful suggestions, offered forms, and hinted that centralizing things would be easier for everyone. Evelyn recorded every attempt and watched her father avoid eye contact, his silence becoming another entry in her evidence log. Evelyn began preparing for the confrontation she knew would come, not emotionally but strategically. She rehearsed what she would say and where she would let silence make the strongest impact. She chose the setting carefully. A family dinner with witnesses around but not enough noise to distract from the truth. She wanted clarity, not chaos. When the evening arrived, Karen looked radiant, confident, and fully in control of the narrative she believed she owned. Evelyn took her seat quietly, watching everything with the calm focus she had learned in the military. During dinner, Karen steered conversations the way she always did, speaking about responsibility, stability, and the future. She praised Evelyn's accomplishments with a tone that made them sound like shared achievements rather than personal ones. Evelyn said little, waiting for the moment Karen would try to open the door she had been pushing against for months. It finally came when Karen mentioned formalizing a few things, her eyes flicking toward Evelyn's father for support. Evelyn set her spoon down and asked, "What things?" with a steady voice that silenced the table. Karen tried to smile, but her confidence wavered. Evelyn reminded them calmly that her accounts were already safeguarded, and she had spoken with her bank and legal assistants. The room fell still and her father's face turned pale at the mention of legal support. Karen's voice went tight as she asked, "Why would you do that?" Evelyn replied, "Because someone tried to access my finances without my permission." Karen insisted the situation sounded dramatic, but Evelyn spoke evenly, explaining everything was documented. She turned to her father and reminded him she had set a boundary he allowed to be crossed. His eyes dropped to the table, confirming everything she already knew. Karen tried confronting Evelyn in the kitchen afterward, her tone sharp and wounded. "You're making this ugly," she said, stepping closer. Evelyn replied, "It already was. I just stopped pretending." Karen stared at her, calculating, then asked, "You think you have power here?" Evelyn answered, "I know I do." For the first time, Karen looked frightened, realizing Evelyn wasn't bluffing and wasn't reacting emotionally. Evelyn understood that people like Karen feared losing leverage more than losing love. A week later, Karen suggested a large dinner to reconnect, inviting relatives who still treated Evelyn like a quiet teenager. Evelyn agreed immediately, surprising Karen and giving her a moment of hesitation before she recovered. On the night of the dinner, the house smelled warm and familiar, Yet Evelyn felt none of the comfort she once associated with it. Karen had arranged everything perfectly, wearing a soft cream sweater to appear gentle and harmless in front of the guests. As people arrived with hugs and compliments, Evelyn stayed calm, waiting for the right moment. She knew Karen would eventually open the door she herself had built. During dinner, Karen guided the conversations with confident ease, always circling back to topics involving planning, responsibility, and shared futures. Guests nodded politely, unaware of the tension beneath her cheerful tone. Evelyn waited patiently, listening with calm detachment as Karen subtly hinted at family stability and long-term structure. Finally, during dessert, Karen smiled and said, "With Evelyn's income, we're fortunate to have such security." Evelyn raised her head slowly and asked, "What kind of security?" The room grew strangely quiet as Karen hesitated for the first time that night. Evelyn reached into her bag and placed a slim envelope on the table without opening it. Karen's eyes locked onto it, her smile flickering with unease. Evelyn announced that her bank had contacted her about multiple unauthorized attempts to access her accounts. She explained calmly that the inquiries were not mistaken but repeated and deliberate. Karen tried to laugh it off, claiming banks often made errors. Evelyn responded, "Not with documentation like this," and the silence spread across the table like a shadow. Her father attempted to stop the conversation, insisting it could wait until later, but Evelyn shook her head. "It was discussed publicly," she said, "so it can be addressed publicly." She revealed that she had opened a file with the fraud department and consulted legal assistance, making her intentions clear. Karen's hand trembled as she lifted her glass, her confidence draining in front of the witnesses she hoped to impress. Evelyn told her father she had set a boundary, and he had allowed it to be crossed. His silence confirmed everything Evelyn had suspected for years. When the guests finally left, Karen closed the door and turned on Evelyn with quiet fury. "You humiliated me," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut. Evelyn replied, "I told the truth." Karen stepped closer and whispered, "You think you've won?" Evelyn held her gaze and answered, "I think you understand me now." For the first time, Karen looked uncertain, as if the ground she had claimed so confidently had tilted beneath her feet. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday in a neutral office with glass walls and simple furniture. Evelyn arrived early, reviewing her notes with steady hands. Her father entered looking tired, the weight of his choices finally showing on his face. Karen arrived 3 minutes late, dressed sharply and pretending she still held control. The mediator introduced the session, and Evelyn remained calm as facts replaced emotions. Karen attempted to call the situation a misunderstanding, but the documents told a different story. The mediator asked Evelyn what outcome she sought, and she explained her terms clearly. She wanted written confirmation that her finances belonged to her alone and that any previous attempts to access them were unauthorized. She insisted her name and income would never again be used in financial discussions without her consent. Karen called the demands dramatic, but Evelyn stayed firm. When asked what would happen if they refused, Evelyn said, "Then the fraud file moves forward." The statement left no room for interpretation. Her father signed first, the sound of the pen scratching against paper louder than any argument. Karen read the document with a mixture of anger and disbelief before signing it with a sharp stroke. Evelyn watched them both, not with triumph but with clarity. This wasn't victory, it was closure. The mediator thanked them, and the meeting ended with quiet tension lingering in the room. Evelyn walked out without looking back. 2 days later, Evelyn drove back to base in silence, using the long road to clear her thoughts. Her father sent a short message saying he hoped she was okay, but she didn't reply. She no longer carried anger, she simply had nothing left to give him. A relative later mentioned Karen was telling people Evelyn had become cold, blaming the military for the change. Evelyn didn't correct the story because she no longer needed validation. Anyone who had witnessed the truth already understood the real reason. On her first free weekend, Evelyn visited her mother's grave. She stood quietly, no flowers in her hand and no prepared speech in her mind. She simply said, "I handled it. I didn't let them take what wasn't theirs." The wind moved gently through the trees as if carrying her words upward. She wished she could tell her younger self that silence wasn't strength and strength wasn't sacrifice. She finally understood that boundaries were not walls but self-respect. Life settled into a peaceful rhythm afterward, without the weight of hidden intentions pulling at her. Her accounts remained protected, her credit secure, and the fraud file closed with no further action needed. Her father tried once more to apologize, but Evelyn knew trust didn't rebuild through words spoken too late. She carried forward the lessons her mother taught her: preparation, clarity, and self-ownership. Evelyn realized family wasn't defined by shared names or shared addresses. It was defined by care freely given, not taken by force or expectation. And as she walked into her future with quiet confidence, she understood that protecting her life wasn't selfish, it was necessary.